Please welcome to the stage, Mae Catt.
Hello.
There you go. Hey, nice and comfy. How are you doing? Oh, you're kind of cross-legged. I don't do it in public, but I'm a big cross-legged.
I'm small, so like I'll fit in any space.
Nice. How are you doing then? Are you?
I'm a little nervous. I've never done a panel where it was just me. And I do think this is dangerous because I really do love talking about myself.
Awesome. It's my favourite kind of panel where I ask as few questions as possible and I let the guests talk. Nobody's here to see me, they're here to see you. So, awesome. Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself then? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do?
My name is Mae Catt. I'm from Los Angeles, California. That's why I have this lovely accent. And I'm a screenwriter. And I got my first writer's room was actually Transformers Cyberverse. And from Cyberverse, I've also written on War for Cybertron Kingdom. And then most recently was story editor on season 1 of Transformers Earthspark.
Awesome. So, just rolling back, you said you're a screenwriter. How did you get into that?
Oh boy.
Tell us the details, go for it.
As someone who grew up in LA, it was very easy for me to be like, I want to work in Hollywood. It's literally 10 minutes away from where I lived, where I was growing up. But I got started writing by writing Matrix fan fiction when I was like 13. And I do, like, that's all I did was I like went home, did homework, and then wrote Matrix fan fiction. And then eventually somebody got me Final Draft for my birthday, which is like the software you use to write screenwriting. I was 14 and I wrote like a 135-page screenplay. And it was terrible and written by a 14-year-old, but it was mine. And from that moment on, I've been aiming towards writing, and here I am.
Awesome. Does that maybe explain a few little Matrix twists we've seen? Do you want to talk through those?
Honestly, when that was started happening in Cyberverse, that was not my pitch. That was honestly the room organically coming up with it. And I was sitting there in this room with these guys that I had been in that same little conference room for like a year straight, and I knew that if I got too excited, they usually are like, oh, Mae's too excited about this thing. So they were like basically pitching the Matrix, and I was just like, yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, I totally can do that.
Let's put them all into a machine. Yeah, let's do it. Amazing. Well, you're not the only writer that we have at the convention who's got into Transformers via fanfic, because I know James Roberts, we all know about James Roberts, if you haven't read it, I mean, would recommend. But so yeah, that's awesome to know that people can start through fanfiction. Does anyone here read or write fanfiction?
Heck yeah.
Oh, okay, that's very awesome.
I'll tell you now, like, I've never understood the sort of stigma against fanfiction. When I'm in my professional meetings talking about that question of like, how did I get started, everybody's always really delighted. They're never like, oh, you're not a real writer. So like, I always like to say, like, listen, if it's fan fiction, it doesn't matter. Writing is writing, and writing nourishes the writer. So I implore you to keep writing, even if it is fan fiction.
Awesome, especially, I imagine, writing with an existing story, an existing set of characters must be quite different to, writers who come up with their own characters and lore and world on their own. Because the fan fiction, okay, you get some heavy edits, don't you? But if you're writing with an existing set of characters and you're creating a new story or a new alternative, so how is that as a writer, writing from scratch when you've got blank canvas versus within an existing continuity?
I'll say within an existing continuity, it's a little bit more difficult because, particularly with something like Transformers, it's a legacy thing. It's 40 years old. It's older than me. Like, when I first started on Cyberverse, I wasn't a huge Transformer fan. I was a huge G.I. Joe fan, and there just happened to be enough crossover that I was like, yeah, Starscream, obviously. Yes. Getting into any IP that I am going to write on, I try to find the thing about it that I love, because if I can love the IP, if I can love the IP like a fan, I know that I will do my best work. So on one hand, I have to find your in, and then secondly, keep in mind that because it is a thing that's 40 years old, the thing that you are going to be able to contribute has to be So what, you're being hired because you're the writer. So even though this thing has so much history, you have to be able to be like, okay, so what can I bring to this that is uniquely myself? And that has consistently gotten me hired. But when it's a blank canvas, I mean, like, because I'm such a fan fiction writer, even my blank canvases will probably start from a place of like, well, can I write a character like Starscream, but this happens?
Well, speaking of Starscream, have we got any Starscream fans here? Yeah? We got any Starscreams in the building? Anyone? Yeah, there we go. Usually it's several people, every TF Nation has Starscream, and you know, he's one of the most popular characters, I'd say, throughout all Transformers, you know. Tell us about your writing, your versions of Starscream and where that's come from. Honestly, we need to do a whole panel on Starscream, I'd be very happy with that. Go.
I mean, I always gravitated towards Starscream because I gravitated towards Cobra Commander. They're very much similar characters. But with Starscream in particular, like, because Cobra Commander is the boss, Starscream is not. And just watching, you know, binging as much of G1 as I did in prep for Cyberverse, I was like, oh, I love this dynamic. I love that there's just this nasty little man on the corner who's just like, I should be in charge.
And then just get slapped, yeah.
Yeah. And then eventually, like, you know, around Kingdom, I was able to sort of pitch Hasbro on this notion of like, hey, I think the sustainability of your character is going to be predicated on whether or not you address this history at all. Like, because you can't ignore it. You absolutely could. It's war, it's Megatron. You totally could just like not acknowledge it whatsoever. But for my money, I'm like, no, you gotta fold that into the character. And, you know, even write him past that point in his history and like how has that affected him? How will that continue to affect him? Etc., etc.
Awesome, great answer. And then speaking of Kingdom, there's a lot of characters
Yes.
from obviously that you know we revisit. Can you tell us anything about them? What you changed from them? What you introduced?
Oh sure. I mean, like, I remember I met with the producers. I think before even Siege had been written. And they kind of gave me like the plan that they were eventually going to get to the Beast Wars characters. And I do remember I had a 1,000-yard stare like past them into the future where I was like, oh, if I could write for Dinobot. And then like 2 years later, because that's how long animation takes, they were like, hey, do you want to write for Dinobot? And I was like, I'm gonna kill that motherfucker. It was interesting because with Kingdom, I was the Beast Wars, like Beast Wars was the Transformers that I grew up on. And I distinctly remember it was on right before kindergarten. I'm so sorry if that hurts anybody. I'm mentioning my age to Jerry Rowan every time he's like... So I remember it would come on before kindergarten and I would have to go to school before the end of the episode would show up. So I never saw like the last 5 minutes to any Beast Wars episode. But finally, Beast Wars came on, and it was me and Tim Sheridan was the other writer for Kingdom. Tim Sheridan is a huge G1 fan, and it was really on me. He was really like, teach me about Beast Wars. So the first like 2 days of our summit, I was like, and this is Transmutate. We're not going to get into Transmutate, but this is who she is. And a lot of Kingdom was a lot of my fandom just being like, hey, we've got this and we've got that command, the scimitars can rat trap transform and all these things. So, you know, Kingdom obviously came with a box of like, this is the story it has to tell, and within that box we tried to be as authentic as we could.
Oh, okay, so that leads to my next question. So, obviously Kingdom was the third part of the Netflix series trilogy. I was going to ask, how much say did you have in the story, seeing as obviously you were just writing about 1/3?
It's always interesting with Hasbro, because Hasbro obviously will be like, these are the toys we want to sell, and you're like, great.
Make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so, particularly with Kingdom, there was a certain box, there was the other 2 series, and it was just like, listen, we're going to have the Beast Wars characters, this is sort of the setup, Godspeed. And we were like, cool, great. And they'll give you like the assets. They'll be like, this is as many characters as you can have. This is the budget for how many can transform.
And that one wasn't transform.
Yeah. No, sometimes you don't see them transform. It's delightful. So like, look, you get a box, but like for a writer, sometimes you need a box. Like sometimes it's better to have a controlled sandbox than it is to just have whatever you want, otherwise nothing would get done. So particularly because we live in such an IP-driven world, I have found my strength comes from like, give me a box, I will make it the prettiest box it could possibly be.
Nice, I like that. So the core story itself then, was that left up to you of like, no, this is what's happened in the first two?
A little bit, yeah.
Run with it. Did they give you an ending? Like, did they tell you?
They did
not.
Like,
we don't care, you can kill them all, just to make sure they look pretty and safe.
They did not really give us an ending. They were just sort of, they tell you who they're willing to let die. And you're like, okay, well,
who were they willing to let die?
Usually, listen, if it's a good story, you can convince anyone of anything, but like, if it's a corporation, sometimes it's a bit harder. Like, there was a lot of pushback on Starscream and Kingdom, and that's where I came up with the line of like, you have to let me do this, because I don't know where this character's gonna go for like the next 30 years if you don't. Yeah. And that worked, but sometimes you can pitch them other things and they're just like, that doesn't really fit with us. You know, it's a collaboration.
Nice. Out of interest, have you seen the new movie, The Rise of the Beasts?
Did.
What did you think of that as a Beast Wars fan and writer?
It was what it was.
It's not a marvelous book?
It certainly was a movie.
It certainly was, yeah. I still can't get over the fact they put Beast Wars on the big screen. I'm genuinely like, who signed that off? What were they on at the time?
I saw it late for some reason. Like, I didn't see it opening weekend, so all the Ape Link jokes on Twitter, I was like, what's going on here? And then I see it, I'm like, Ape Link?
It's just so unexpected, yeah. No, that's fair. It's just there's been a lot of Beast Wars stuff kind of re-emerging in the last few years, and
nostalgia's a hell of a drug.
It really is. It really is. Who is a beast machine? Who's a beast? I mean, maybe there's some beasts in the crowd, but a Beast Wars, Beast Machine, Beast Mode. Yeah, we've got some Beast fans.
Beast Machine,
Beast Machine, yeah. Beast Machine. This is a mistake. Everyone just likes G1. You know, Beast Wars references are kind.
I met one of the story editors on Beast Machines at San Diego Comic-Con. And it was unexpected. He didn't know who I was, I didn't know who he was, and I was like, by the way, I love Beast Machines. And he was like, no you don't. I was like, no, transform and transcend, I still remember that shit. And he was really like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, dude.
That's sad. Yeah, but I mean, Beast Machines is very popular, I'd say, in the world. I think it's great. I love it.
Listen, I tried to make it look better about the whole thing. I think
I look past the visuals, but you know, you have to do that with a lot of things in life. It's okay, you know, it's inside that counts. Okay, moving on to other characters we spoke about, to Starscream. Talk about Megatron in Earthspark. Well, you know, what about Megatron? Can you tell us how, like, where, you know,
sure.
Where that came from?
I'll tell you this. For one, I'm not on Earthspark Season 2, I'm so sorry to say. No, me too, I feel similarly, but it's okay. But with the Megatron situation, I came into Earthspark a little late. And so, like, Nightshade was already conceived. The fact that Megatron was going to be, you know, at least sort of protagonist, a good guy in a sense, was already conceived. And I was able to come in. It's so funny, because in Cyberverse, I was not by any means an expert. And then by the time we get to Earthspark, I'm just like, oh shit, have you done this, have you done that, have you done this? And the poor showrunner, this sweetheart of a man named Dale Milanowski, he was like, slow down. What are you talking about? I'm new to Transformers. I'm like, you're new to Transformers. You just came up with one of the greatest ideas, which is to finally let Megatron be on the same side as Optimus. And what does that look like? It's just, what a beautiful day it was for me to get the show Bible. And I was just like, oh shit.
I don't know how many people have seen Earthspark here in the room? Yeah. More popular than Beast Wars or Beast Machines. Evidently. That first episode when, you know, that reveal of Megatron comes in is just such a mic drop, and it's just like, oh, you know,
this is not going to be your daddy's Transformers. It's such an elegant way to be like, this is going to be different.
It's a real, you're like, oh, I'm listening. You know, it's this, I'm you know.
This was a side effect, good.
Yeah, awesome. Anything else you can tell us about Earthspark? Any memories, or how did you get involved in it in the first place?
So many memories. I was working over at DreamWorks at the time in the middle of the quarantine portion of the pandemic, and then my really good friend Leslie Wisniewski, who I had known on Cyberverse, called me up about an opportunity to work on Earthspark. and she couldn't tell me anything, but she was really like trying to be like, Mae, you're gonna really enjoy it if you can do this. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And then of course I get the Bible, I see what Megatron's up to, I see these new Terrans, and I'm just like, oh, what a genius way to make new Transformers and make a different kind of show. And I was so impressed that not only this was happening, but that Hasbro was as supportive and as excited as they were about it. And like they've always been particularly excited and particularly supportive of Nightshade. Nightshade's not going anywhere. The show's gonna be fine. Don't worry about any. Like the backlash was expected.
Yeah, it's certainly causes stuff. Like, I know quite a few people who aren't into Transformers at all, and they mentioned, "I've seen this thing on the internet."
Yeah, my poor mother. Like I called her to be like, "Isn't this cool?" And she was like, "Are you okay?" I thought it'd be neat. Yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about me.
Awesome. So, we're all very sorry to hear that you're not writing on season 2. If you could, let's just, rip that fact up. If you were, what would you like to
RC
see?
strands. I tried so goddamn hard. But it's one thing. It's one thing to create a new character and be like, this character gets to be not gender non-conforming or gets to be queer in some manner, and it's a whole other thing to be like, what about your back catalog? That's much more difficult.
Existing characters, yeah.
RC Strands, Starscream and Hashtag have a show, probably like Twitch. They're on Twitch playing games or something.
Maybe you should see some fanfic. Maybe we should try to write an official fanfic, what we could do.
I still have my AO3 account, like, you can have it.
Yeah, maybe we can make it happen. Speaking about queer characters, can you tell us about Black Arachnia in Go Back to Kingdom?
Sure.
Yeah, how did that come about? Was
That came about just because, like, listen, I'm queer, my wife is queer, like, that is just, it's an inevitability of what I work on. It's just like, obviously these things, this might be part of my unique perspective that I'm going to bring to these characters that are decades old. But it came very naturally. It was super easy and just like, no one resisted. Everybody was very happy with it. I think there was more confusion with the Air Razor, but like, hang on. Deciding how to phrase something. With Air Razor, there was a moment where Tim and I were like, it's unfortunate because I remember Air Razor as like Tigatron's girlfriend, and that is unfortunate. That was unfortunate for me growing up. That's just like an unfortunate thing with that character. And Tim was like, well, what if we made it so that Tigatron is her boyfriend? Like that's just like how we think of the two of them. And I was like, you're so right, let's do it. And then just in making her, the attempt to make her as cool as fucking possible, and to naturally let this moment with Black Arachnia and Air Razor just happen. Like it just was like I was sitting at my computer and I was like, yeah, this is the way it's gonna go.
Awesome. And I think it's great to hear that Hasbro and the creators that behind it are supportive.
Yes.
I think that's probably something that everyone's really.
I do want to say, and I want to emphasize, everyone is always supportive. Everyone from Hasbro, from Nickelodeon, from the creative side, from the non-creative side, everyone really earnestly wants this representation. They just don't know how to always follow through with it. They don't know how to do it right. They're scared to make a mistake. And so sometimes it turns into a heated discussion that you weren't expecting. But like, I have to commend them. Their hearts are in the right place. And they've consistently been in the right place, even if things have been a little difficult here and there.
Do you think Transformers as a franchise lends itself to introducing that kind of representation?
They're robots.
I mean, they're a really good question, but
this has consistently been my half of the heated discussion where I get to be like, they're alien robots. Why do they have gender at all? But yeah, I mean, look, all of our pop culture and all of our media is inevitably a reflection of society and what society is valuing at that time, which is why we get, grumpy people just being like, that's not my Starscream or whatever. But like, things change, and how and whom they reflect will change. But particularly with something like Transformers, where the characters aren't even human and are these sort of alien creatures that can have an alien perspective on these things. Like, it lends them to particularly be very good at changing them so they mirror different parts of us.
Yeah, very awesome. So we see a lot of that explored in the comics, obviously in the recent kind of like decade or so. For example, IDW, I understand you're a big IDW fan. You want to tell us about that?
Sure. I met Derek Wyatt at Warner Brothers Animation. I wasn't even working there, but Derek and I geeked over Cobra Commander and G.I. Joe. And then he was like, have you read any of the comics, any of the IDW Transformer comics? And I was like, no. He's like, you have to read like The Fall of the Wreckers right now. And I was like, okay. So when I got the Cyberverse job, I started with Derek's recommendations, and I just like ate through the Wrecker series and then into More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light. So that was like my guiding compass when I was learning about Transformers. So, you know, even though I grew up on Beast Wars, in my professional life as an adult, like really they've always been extremely queer to me, and so it's never a weird issue where I'm like, oh, this is unusual. No, they've always been this way to me, and I hope to help them always be that way for everyone else.
Awesome, nice. Yeah. So, obviously you told us how you grown up on Beast Wars and then you didn't know that much else about Transformers, but now you're kind of the one telling everyone else how it was?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think is kind of unique about Transformers compared to various other franchises?
Ooh, like that question. I'll tell you what, and I'm so sorry for the kids. Kids, cover your ears, don't do drugs. When I first got the Cyberverse job, I got a little high, and I was with some friends, and I was watching some of the movie. My wife and I were watching a little bit of the movie off in the corner at this little party, and then came a moment where Optimus transforms for the first time. Big epic moment. And there's a moment where he kind of inhales, like he breathes in, and my wife just went, he's alive? And in my state, I was like, he is alive. And then I proceeded to tell the party about Primus and sort of their creation myth, and I was just very connected to it in this deep and profound way. But I think particularly, the thing that makes it different is how the lore of it all, the fact that their creation myth is so beautiful. I particularly love that they're like, this Cybertron is Primus, he's right here. There's no question about it, he's here. And he gives life to us, and like there's just this air of sort of mysticism to them that is very effortless, like Optimus being a prime and what that means and what the matrix of leadership does. So there's this sort of effortless sci-fi meets this fantasy wrapped up in these robots who have been at war for most of their entire lives. And I think that's just beautiful that their story involves so much strife and so much pain, and like they're you know, depending on where you're setting your story, they're near the end of a war or they're ragged by the ravages of war. Like, I just think it's a fascinating sandbox to tell stories in.
Yeah, absolutely. And then of course we have that lore and the mythology, you say, of it, but then we see that in like, it's almost like alternate universes with all the different continuities. How do you use that, or how have you used that when you're creating things? Do you go, oh, I can't do the same thing, oh no, I have to do the same thing?
I do. I like to think of continuity, again, because these IPs are 40 years old, or they're legacy IPs. Like, I do like to think of continuity like jazz. Like, it's cool to riff off of something, it's cool to build off of something, with the goal of like, if I'm building or riffing, what is like the unique thing that I'm bringing to it. But it does help to know it, and know it as well as you can, or not even like, I'm not an encyclopedia by any means, but I know what I like, and I know what I can bring on top of what I like.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Do we got any questions from the audience? We'll do a few questions just initially, because I have a feeling we might have quite a few. Justin, can we grab the mic? Yeah? Can we go to some people with some questions? Thank you.
Firstly, Spark's terrific.
Thank you. I cannot take all the credit. representing Nurse Spark, I say thank you so much.
Yeah. Second of all, as somebody whose principal credentials are in paleontology, I was pretty both surprised and glad to see Jawbreakers old mode, Skinny Mohawk, Pachycephalosaur representation, and obscure dinosaur representation.
Yeah, dinosaur representation, yeah.
I do have a question. Was it something from Hasbro, or did somebody on the writing staff decide that? Because
It's all the show creator, Dale. Dale, like the Terrans are very much Dale's children. Like those were the selling point of the show, and those were where he obviously put most of his heart and soul into. So a lot of the Terrans are, by the time I came onto the show, they were what they are. And Jawbreaker was always going to be a stigma lock, according to Dale.
Awesome. Okay, got loads of hands up. We will take a question at the back.
So with Earth-Spark, like having characters from like multiple other cartoons, like Tarantula from Beast Wars, and like if you were given a chance to like add another character from like any other like cartoon, it doesn't matter like Beast Wars or like the Unicorn trilogy, who would you add?
I think it's one of the great failures of my career thus far that I haven't gotten a neurodivergent transmutate into a show. Desperately want to get a transmutate in there somehow, someday. And Thundercracker and Buster. Thundercracker and Buster as well.
On the table.
Oh yeah, of course. As soon as I showed Nicole Buster, she was like, "Oh, they're going in the show." But alas, things happen. The show must go on. It's okay. We'll see. Well, maybe they'll pop up.
Question?
Are there any headcanons you have for any characters that haven't yet appeared in Earthspark, like, you know, what they're doing? As you say, you like Thundercracker and Buster or whatnot, they're in Earthspark, but they're just like off screen.
It's been so long since I've thought about, like, what are my headcanons? Well, like, there was a hot second that I really wanted Drift and Ratchet in there and have them be just like husbands. And very explicitly, like, my husband. So I think they're around. I think they're, you know, wherever they are together doing stuff. Very much, Thundercracker's writing his screenplay somewhere, obviously. I just steal from the J-Ro catalog. That's all I do.
That's very fair. It's a solid catalogue. Okay, question in the middle.
Thank you, great panel so far. Just a quick question. You said you started off writing fan fiction and then you obviously moved on to doing it professionally. Do you have to moderate your style at all? Do you have to be a little bit more conservative if you're doing it professionally? Or can you still do it the same way and just let your imagination run wild?
Well, you know, like I was saying, particularly with like IPs, usually there is some sort of box, but regardless of the box, like the passion that one has while writing fan fiction, that's the same passion I have doing it professionally or not. And if, honestly, the closer I can get to that passion, the better the writing is going to be. You know, if I'm feeling passionate about it, I know the fans will. But you know, within the confines of like, what is the story we're telling, go crazy. But yeah.
Right? Yeah. Question 5.
Is there any chance of there being like a season, say, 3 of Earthspark? Because I'm pretty sure it's like, is that like 1 or 2 seasons?
Yeah, no, there's always a possibility.
Right.
Go buy some toys.
Yeah. You know what to do.
Actually, it's coming out
Otherwise, we know how to make it happen. Okay, all the questions. Just, yeah, take it away, Justin. Thank you.
Hi, I know you said that you came into sort of the development of season 1 relatively late, but I'd love to hear you talk all about kind of the particular focus on like family dynamics, not just with the Maltos, but with the other Transformers characters, because there's such an emphasis on that, and that kind of emotional character focus aspect of the show, which, I mean, I really love, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So usually when there's going to be like a new show of anything, Transformers included, like there will be a wide net is cast, and people like myself would have the opportunity to go up to Hasbro or Nickelodeon and be like, if it were my show, this is what I would do. You're pitching them what you would do in a perfect world. And I think that happened with EarthSpark, but it was Dale and EarthSpark in particular that got chosen because I think of how central the family dynamic was to it. I think Dale, being an outsider to Transformers relatively, gave him that freedom to not look at what had come before and just being like, well, you know, I know his family is mixed race. I know he was dealing with coming into a new family, and I think he was writing what he knew within the world of Transformers, and good on Hasbro and Nickelodeon for being like, yeah, that's it, we want that. And given that that theme is at the heart of the show, it naturally bleeds into the dynamics of all the other characters, which is so exciting because, like, you know, there's other shows you can see where like they're not being thought of as like a found family, when like they're truly like brothers in arms in an endless war. I think they just lend themselves so naturally to it. And I'm so happy that I got to work on it and proud of the work of EarthSpark Season 1.
Nice. I've got, just a follow-up question on that. How do you find writing humans in a world of Transformers? Because I think it's I don't know, one of my biggest bugbears from previous shows. And you're like, oh, the annoying kids. Like,
I did get spoiled. I got spoiled on Cyberverse and Kingdom not writing humans. So the humans, I was like, okay. But then it's the fact that the Terrans are also kids. That you're like, okay, the kids are not annoying. They're not bringing the kid energy. The kid energy is just here. And they get to be a part of that. And we get to sort of welcome them into Transformer antics. So, you know, it's such a genius little premise. I love it so much.
nice. Okay, practice questions here in the middle.
Hi, Mae. Sort of a two-part question, just riffing on one of the previous answers there. As a fan myself, as a long-time fan, it fills me with joy to hear that you're a fan of the work you're doing. But obviously that professional line and that fandom line, there's a blur in there. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about, you know, as you already touched on, in the room, when you're being a fan and you really want to fight for something, but then the professional side, how do you counter that and balance that? Sort of similarly then, going back to Cyberverse, where you had 11-minute episodes, and yet at the same time, you know, as fans, you know, we love the big, you know, massive, expansive, season-long arcs, and, you know, in comics, you know, massive, long, multi-issue threads. How do you balance that? That's very much the fan thing, the big, long story, but business says you've got 11 minutes to sell toys.
Yeah.
How did you find that, and that whole fan versus professional creator?
Well, it was interesting because, especially with Cyberverse, I had never written 11 minutes before. So thank goodness that room, they allowed me to watch 3 other scripts get made, and then it was my turn. So I kind of got to see the process happen. But like, I suppose the professionalism of it all is being able to take the constraints of it's 11 minutes, technically it's for children 6 to 11, and being able to be like, okay, I'm going to write for that to satisfy these needs and these notes and the client and this audience, while also bring what I love to it, because I know other people will love it too. I suppose that's where one becomes a professional, but like honestly, that just comes with practice. I don't want to gatekeep my profession. If you're a writer, you're a writer.
Awesome. Thank you for your question.
Hi, first of all, I'd like to express my gratitude for all the efforts you've made to bring more diversity into this IP. The world is transforming, and it's really amazing to see that Transformers is also changing in a positive way. And I have a question about Cyberverse for you. So I've been wondering that how did you came up with the idea to let Hot Rod and Drift fight each other? Like,
that was my mistake. I'm so sorry, everyone. We were in the room trying to decide, like, who's the traitor? Who's the Autobot traitor? And I piped up with my big mouth, and I was just like, well, you know, Drift and Hot Rod are like besties in the comics. We could make them besties in the show for 5 minutes in time for them to betray each other. So that's how that happened.
Okay, that's at the back.
Hi, Mae, nice to meet you again.
There.
As I've said, that I'm doing a bachelor degree in film, TV and radio. For somebody who's done script writing, having an idea in your head, it sounds so cool, but translates so differently when you put it in a scene. Has there ever been a moment when you've gone through like the whole steps and everything, you've got an idea, you write it down, you draw it, it's like, oh, this is so cool. When it comes to actually putting in the scene, do you ever go like, uh-oh?
Oh yeah, all the time. My advice is like, once you have written a script, read it out loud to yourself, because there's so much, how something is heard versus how you write it down totally changes, and so like, it really helps to just like say your dialogue out loud. But yeah, all the time. Like I think the key to being a screenwriter is to never be too married to anything you're doing, because you're gonna have to, what's called, kill your darlings. You're gonna love a scene or love a concept, and eventually it's just not gonna work for what the job is, and you're gonna have to cut it out, and you have to have a good attitude about that. And like, not to say that there's certain things that you don't stand up for and say, no, I think this is really important for star screening or the story, et cetera, but like, you also have to be able to kind of bob and weave with those moments where like, you're like, oh yeah, this isn't gonna work.
First of all, I just want to say it's so nice to see like transformative fandom slowly become more the forefront, kind of, as the writers room gets more diverse, and it's so wonderful to have you here. And I forgot my question.
I'm at the table, you can come ask it later, it's cool.
We can come back to you if you need a minute, it's all good. You've got time.
Oh, this is frustrating, I'm so sorry, but...
You've got 15 minutes, we'll make sure we come back to you.
15 minutes?
Oh, we've got 15 minutes, yeah?
I remembered, okay.
Let's do it.
I'm so sorry. From the European perspective, it's a little... I also work in TV, but it's hard to get like on as a writer, especially if you come from the fanworks background. And I'm wondering, what does that process look like in the US? Because I do feel like the TV landscape is kind of different on the two continents.
Well, I mean, we're striking right now, so that's great.
Hey, man.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, just wait, guys.
Let me answer.
Just wait.
I'll be right with you. But there comes a time when you've broken into your career enough, where essentially, if you've got an agent and a manager and they can vouch for you, because agent and managers, their entire job is to hype you up and be like, this person is the new shit. They're so cool. They're gonna get the job done, and they get you meetings. When you've reached that level, you're good. You can kind of be your authentic nerdy self, and that will just kind of become the charm of you, which is what has happened to me. Which is why when I mentioned fan fiction, like, people whose job it is to like hire me to write movies are like, oh, that's cute, and I'm like, thank you. So, but of course the problem of like, well, how does one get an agent and manager? And I'm so sorry, there's no good answer. Every path you're gonna take, every single person has a different career path. Like mine truncated. I got my first job on Young Justice because I met Greg Wiseman through a contest when I was 14. And that's just something that can never get replicated for anyone, and no one else can do that. That was just my weird ass way to becoming a professional screenwriter. But I would say, like, listen, it's a war of attrition. It takes a long time. I remember when I was in film school, the people who were a little further in their careers than me, they were just like, it's a war of attrition. You're gonna watch all of your classmates leave the industry or settle for different jobs and find fulfillment there. And there's only gonna be like one or two of you that are actually gonna do what you're saying you're gonna do. And that is what has happened. It's hard, but like, you can do it. You can do it, and you should do it, because there needs to be more people making these stories. So good luck to you.
Okay, we've got a question over here.
Hi Mae. I just wanted to ask, while you were going into your deep delve into the franchise, obviously there are queerness throughout any franchise, especially in the 80s and 90s. There were these moments of very thinly veiled covert queerness. Did you find any threads that inspired you the most, or things that you were just like, this is not straight? Who was that? Oh, this is straight.
All of Cobra Commander? I know that's not Transformers, but the second I saw Cobra Commander, I'm like, that man loves everybody. But in particular with Transformers, I would say, this is such a basic answer, but like with Cyclonus and Tailgate, like my wife and I were like, we were already dating, but we were kind of in the throes of falling in love, and she's trans, and up until dating her, I had identified as straight, which everybody was like, Mae, you're not. Mae, come on. But like up until then, and I think Natalie and I were a little desperate for like representation and just like seeing other couples, and it was those dumb robots. I was like, that's us. All right, we can figure this out.
Great. Oh, great. Okay.
Hello. I myself am autistic, and so it was great to hear that Transmutate might have been able to be in the show at some point. I just wanted to ask, what alt mode would you have picked for them if they were to have been in it?
Oh, geez. You know, that becomes a more difficult question because that turns into a conversation with Hasbro. And they have a little bit more say in that than you do. So I don't have an answer for you because I just hadn't even thought that I would have the authority to say that. But you know, off the cuff, my pitch would be like, well, what if they don't transform for a long time? And it gives us time to kind of figure it out.
Nice. Okay. Questions, guys. I love it. Okay.
So when Cyberverse started, obviously it had a really small scope. It was just Bumblebee and Windblade, and that was it. And I was happy watching it. And then the scope suddenly got big. It suddenly got really big. And then all of a sudden, Rack and Ruin appear on screen, and I'm going, what's going on here? How did you decide to do that?
I'll say, so our story editor on that was a fellow named Randolph Hurd. Randolph was very new to Transformers, and he cleverly filled the room with Transformers veterans like Gavin Hignite and Zach Atkinson and Dan Salarolo, who had previously worked on other Transformer things. And then I came in season 2 a little late. I just come in and fix things. So Randolph was just sort of being new to Transformers, was like, this is some crazy shit. And I do have a distinct memory of literally having a little bit of free time in the room, and he just Googled like, list of the weirdest Transformers. And with Rack and Ruin, it was like love at first sight. He loved those guys. And he was determined. And it worked out.
Nice. Okay,
Hi.
question here?
What I really like Reverse Spark is more like hints of like the previous past of the Transformers, such as like the Decepticons and Orion Pax, I think in season 1, like the latter half. So if you had the chance to get like a picture show set entirely on Cybertron, like before the war, where would you take it and why?
I would take it like right before the war is starting. I'd love to track Optimus and Megatron being like on the same side and watch as Megatron gets increasingly radicalized and Optimus is increasingly like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. And I'd love to have a discussion of like, is Megatron right? Like, we were trying to do that in Earthspark, and I imagine those conversations are still happening even without me, but in many ways it's like, Megatron might be right. Like, when you are faced with fascism, what do you do? Of course, in Megatron's case, it becomes complicated because fascism happens. But I'd love to have the freedom to have those conversations. And the freedom to kind of see who these people were at a time of peace and what that looks like and what were the mistakes they made that peace not only went away, but it went away for millions and millions of years.
Okay.
Hello there. Out of Earthspark, what's the scene that kind of sticks with you as the one that makes you laugh the most?
Ooh, laugh the most. I do love that Thrash has this obsession with squirrels. But I'll tell you, my favorite scene I wrote was it's a wonderful word for a wonderful experience. That was my favorite thing I ever wrote.
Awesome. Okay, got another one at the back.
Hi there. I was just wondering about the decision with the Seekers to have Novastrom included rather than just feminizing Thundercracker.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that happened, huh? Weird thing that maybe somebody said they didn't want that. Yeah, you know, sometimes you ask the company for something and then they go no, and then you go, but here's reasons why this would work, and they go, absolutely not. Sometimes that happens.
Oh, that's it. Wow, it's a trend. Okay, here.
Who is your favourite Transforming character, just out of all of the versions of them?
It's gotta be Starscream. It's such a basic answer, but I'm so sorry.
It's okay, most of us are hard, we're all Starscream fans, aren't we?
Sorry, I'll be cheeky and get a second question.
Yeah,
but
no worries.
I wanted to ask, how would you write a meetup between Cobra Commander and Starscream?
Cobra Commander is retreating. He runs into what he assumes is a Cobra Rattler. It is not. He takes off, and then halfway through it becomes Starscream. And the two have a lovely discussion in the air. And I would suppose partner up for like half an episode before inevitably betraying each other. Yeah.
Nice. As long as you don't get what happens. Which comic is it? Is that like Revenge of Starscream? Anyone read that? It's like a movie comic where Starscream, yeah, it's a really nice graphic and he just like takes them to space and they just like pop in his... Yeah, anyway, I enjoyed that. I remember that part. Yeah, maybe as long as he doesn't do that to Cobra Commander, we're okay. Okay, we've got hello.
So obviously you mentioned how much you have fun sandbox, and obviously you've had a lot of fun in Earthspark, episode 14, first episode. But obviously there has to come a day when you leave the sandbox and you give that to another writer, and obviously Earthspark leaves a lot of trails left unfinished at the end of every single episode, basically. So how do you kind of reconcile that with a writer that you started something that you can't finish, that someone else is going to finish and they might not have the same vision that you have?
Well, you know, that's the name of the game. Like, I try not to have too many feelings about it because I can't control that. And I can only hope that, you know, they get somebody... I have to trust the people in charge as much as they have to trust me. And so there is a level of being like, I have to move on, but I know that you're going to make sure that you continue to make the best show you can. And I think that's true of Earthspark. They've got a really good sandbox, and I personally can't wait to see more. Sometimes I hear stuff and I'm like,
Okay.
So I'm wondering, Megatron being on the same side as Optimus, was that from Dale or Hasbro?
That was Dale. I believe that was in Dale's original pitch, and I believe Hasbro was like, what? Yeah, okay, cool.
Well, let's have a toy shop.
Yeah, it's one of those, I think, unique things about the Earthspark pitch that everybody was just like, oh, this is going to be really fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Question in the back?
Yeah, so there's quite a few characters in Earthspark who've been like, you know, gender bent from previous iterations. Were there like any other characters that were considered and it's like, oh, we should have them be a different gender? Like, even any that didn't show up, but it's like, oh, if they show up, they're probably going to be a different gender.
Are you asking this so I can definitively say we tried to make Thundercracker a woman? Is that what's going on here?
Well, I'm saying one, because like we just found out Ravage was a girl.
Dude. I'm so sorry you all just found that out. It's fine.
It's like the scene at the end where Samways looks into the camera like, Ravage is like, good girl. Sorry, it's more of like if a new character gets revealed, it's like ooh, we could all sit there like, yeah, we got another fembot here.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, perhaps Thundercracker was one of those. No one else springs to mind immediately. I think, you know, getting Alita 1 into the cast was a huge win, and it was a very easy way to be like, all right, now we have a bit more of an even diversity amongst them. And of course the Terrans are evenly distributed gender-wise.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, when Let's Go Spark, you said that Alex is a massive Bumblebee fan. Do you ever consider introducing another human character who is a massive fan of another Transformers character, like Lisa Waller Grimlock?
It came up, and there were hot seconds that like Schroeder was going to be a fan of something else, and like the conversations are always in flux. But it is that delicate balance of how many human characters is too many, and how, you know, ultimately when you have fun little details like that, it does need to be in service of the story. So even fun little like jokes like that need to justify their existence to the writer's room, to our bosses, to Hasbro itself. So like, you can come up with a fun joke like that, and then you need to like weave that shit in there somehow so it becomes integral to the story. And sometimes, particularly with like our human cast, like you're just like, I don't know if there's room for this. We already have 7 kids, 7 main kids, so it becomes very crowded very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've got time for one last question, so...
Hi, Mae.
Oh, no, not you.
Alright.
Sorry, Steve. No, go on, I think.
Where did Windblade go?
Where did Windblade go? I think that might be another, this is the sandbox you're getting from Hasbro. I don't think Windblade is ever gone. I don't think really any of the characters are ever gone. It's just like when are the most opportune moments to be able to get them back on screen. But no, she's much beloved behind the scenes as much as in front of it.
Great. Okay, unfortunately we are at 5 to 1, so we're going to say goodbye and warm thank you.
This is so fun. I have a table if you have more questions. I have nothing going on, so come on, say hi.
Awesome, thank you so much guys. There we've got 5 minutes to take a break. Head on our next panel with Jeremy.